So I saw him back here. We'll start there.
Hi, Greg. I've been accused on more than one occasion by a fellow debater of scientism. Now, I look up in the two different dictionaries, and one, you can find it just means that you apply a rational and objective approach to world events or whatever. But then, of course, another dictionary, Merriam-Webster, says it's an exaggerated use of science in an unorthodox manner to reach it. And so we go back and forth on this scientism. So just wanted to get your take on that. And the one thing I mentioned to him today was the view could always be that, if you try to approach something rationally, logically, whether on, let's say, on the subject of evolution, well, you're just applying your worldview, so you're using scientism. There's no defense against it, because using science, in their view, can be scientism as a pejorative, not as a compliment.
Well, the good news is you both win the debate, because I understand the dictionaries are catalogs of usage, not catalogs of definition. Understand the difference, because definitions change with every edition, because what happens to usage? It changes over time, and that's what dictionaries are. They're records of usage, not records of rule. And so you can interpret the term how you want, and this is why many times, especially Merriam, will never stop short of having 10 different definitions or interpretations of the same term. So what you have to always do is just agree on a definition and work from that point. So the other part of your question, your statement was that, as scientists, do we look through the world through a different lens? Sure we do. And that's okay, as long as we recognize that's the lens that we look through. We just can't let that lens be clouded, because that's what we try and do, right, is be objective. And then as we look through that lens of science, which, by the way, is the very best way to look at the natural world. It's not the best way or any way to maybe look at the theological world. It is the best way to look at the natural world. It's the best tool we have. But we don't want to cloud that lens by saying that science is the only way to achieve that knowledge. You've heard me say before that we all know that there are traditional epistemologies, ways of knowing. 3 common epistemologies are what? Philosophy, theology, and science. And each of those are limited in how they're able to treat the world. Science is limited in what we can view. Because science always has to be what? Testable. If it's not testable, we give it to the philosophers. I'm breaking up here. We give it to the philosophers, or we give it to the theologians. And so in that case, do we look at the world through that science lens? Yeah, we do, and that's okay. We just have to make sure that we're not blinding us. Does that work? Thanks. Woo. I should have a cigarette.
I don't think it's on.
He's back there for more than 5 minutes. I want you to tell me.
Okay. Oh, sorry. I have it in the back. I was at a seminar one time that was dealing with how to talk about political issues and language and such, and the presenter was asking about examples of certain political issues and how to talk about them, and we went through, some Social Security, some other issues. And one of the people who was a scientist said, the issue that I'm interested in is the distortion of science, and this is how I want to talk about it. And the presenter said, well, scientific distortion isn't really a political issue. Essentially saying, this is not a topic that we talk about when we talk about politics, which I thought was kind of symptomatic of my general concern, which is that despite the protestations of the scientific community and others who are sympathetic to this viewpoint, I guess I don't really see the Bush administration taking a political hit for a scientific distortion. And I'm wondering if you see kind of outside of the scientific community or outside of groups like this, a possibility that this will really become what I would think of as a kind of major political point, where you get to the point where people will not say scientific distortion is not a political issue. It doesn't count the way other things count.
Well, 2 issues. My wallet's now gone. The second issue is that your point is well made. Is that all too often the general public probably doesn't believe that this is the problem. And as I mentioned, we just did the abstinence only tonight and the FDA, because if you go to the periodic table of abuses or any other resource, there's no shortage of those. There's so many, it's just amazing. It's almost depressing. But yet the public really doesn't probably realize that. This is why, many of you are aware of this, that there's a big groundswell right now to have a science presidential debate before the next election. And many universities and colleges and professional organizations have signed on to this list requesting that all candidates actually have that debate. There could be a disadvantage and some backfire to doing that, but this is the idea, is to get science. But see, it's being called, it's even misnamed to begin with. It's called the science debate. It should be called the science policy debate. Let's hope that we don't have the three frontrunners getting up there and debating the fine details of nuclear physics. Okay? What they're looking at is science policy, right, which is the application of the scientific knowledge. So it should be termed, first of all, the scientific policy debate. How do you see the role of science in formulating policy? Those are the questions that should be asked and hopefully will be asked. And that's why the very point that you've made and articulated so well, that we see this groundswell just for that, because most of the public is not aware. However, the Democrats have a potential pitfall if that goes through, because there is no doubt right now a lot of the Democrats can just plead deaf, dumb, and blind on the teaching of evolution issue. And it'll just nicely, nobody talks about it, and it might just go their way. If this comes to an issue and somebody says to the candidates, which we know they will, do you accept evolution? Do you believe in creation? Oh, the tables could have just turned. Any of those voters that may have decided to go Democratic may swing the other way in a very, very fast way. It could be a very dangerous proposition for the Democrats to do that, because we know that question is going to come up. And those middle-of-the-road people that might have swung towards Democrats may go the other way. And I'm not suggesting that you should swing one way or the other, but I'm just saying that it's a very real danger in that particular topic. But yeah, that's where we're having that.
All right, I was wondering if you could tell me, how big of an influence does the government have on high school educational science?
On science, it's run by state governments. There are no federal education requirements. There never have been in the country, and we'll probably fight to resist that. It's always done. There are federal guidelines, but none of them are mandates. In fact, Michigan until last year had no educational mandates, believe it or not. For the first time, we now have K-12 educational mandates. Before, we had friendly suggestions, and those are all administered by the state. So they're administered by the state, but they're not entirely funded by the state. Good luck going anywhere in Michigan and try and find any health program that tells you how to apply condoms, how to have safe sex. It's not going to happen, because all of those programs are funded by federal dollars. And if you wish to receive federal dollars, you may only teach abstinence only. And so there's a very fine road that's walked there. And this is the same thing with all throughout Africa, where we have HIV/AIDS spreading. None of those countries receive any money for distribution of condoms, birth control information. The only thing that may be taught with federal dollars is abstinence, and it's just working like wildfire in Africa, isn't it? Just like here.
I feel pretty pessimistic and bleak about all this, and maybe you can either cheer me up or...
The FDA has some drugs that you could take that'll help.
I sense that a significant number of people, maybe even a majority, don't trust science at all. When we read that a majority of people don't believe in evolution, if you distrust that, you've got to distrust astronomy, physics, geology, biology, zoology, almost every science we have.
All the ologies, yeah.
And those people are not going to trust science or scientists, because they're getting their science from another source, their information from another source. Am I being too pessimistic about that?
Well, if you've seen the recent surveys, and I forget who did the survey, they just looked at where people under 25 years get their major source of news. Was it CBS? Was it NBC? ABC? CNN? The Daily Show. They get them from the Tonight Show. They get it from the stand-up comics. So that kind of sets the stage for, the science black box. And science is a black box. It's very hard to have cocktail conversations about the details of science. But here's the good news, bad news about, for instance, your example of if you don't accept evolution. And we usually try and watch our diction, our syntax, and talk about accepting or rejecting the science. You don't believe in evolution because it's not a faith-based ideology, so you either accept or you reject the science. For those people who say, well, I reject the science of evolution. As you appropriately pointed out, in order to reject evolutionary science as being inappropriate science, invalid science, you would therefore have to reject all modern sciences, because the data supporting evolutionary science is based upon all the other ologies. But here's the problem. Conflicting paradigms. People don't draw that conclusion. They're okay to say, I reject this aspect of science, so I reject that the Earth is, 4.6 billion years old, but I'm comfortable with, the other aspects of science. So there's a disconnect there between those. A study I'd like to show that when I was in Australia at the university there, a study, I've shared this with people here before, that there was a study administered to our incoming freshman students who had never, ever had a science class in their life at a university. And the question in the survey said, how long ago did the dinosaurs disappear? And the correct answer of 65 million-ish and change was in there. And the incorrect answer of 10,000 years was in there. And then later on, there was another question that said, how old is the Earth? And there was the correct answer of 4.6 billion and change. There was the incorrect answer of 6 to 10,000 years old. Interesting, the students who got the age of the Earth wrong, they chose 6 to 10,000 years. Later on, chose the correct extinction for the dinosaurs of 65 million. You can be pessimistic. We have drugs for that.
I was just looking today at some Barna research. Barna is like a Gallup, but he focuses mostly on religion stuff. And it's pretty disheartening when 60% of the population believes in the six-day creation, and numbers go up from there about other irrational beliefs. And it's really difficult when the majority of the population is irrational and will not accept science because it conflicts with an ideology or a theology. And how do we, get at that?
Well, it's not easy. And I heard the comment is that that's a problem. When we have conflicting ideologies, there are a variety of ways to deal with those, and I've actually presented those ideas here before. And one, of course, is deny that the conflict exists. The other is to acknowledge the conflict but not wish to do anything about it. And we have a lot of friends who are that way. Is that, I understand the dinosaurs have been gone for 65 million years, but I also believe the Earth is 6 to 10,000 years old, and let's not worry about it anymore. So we compartmentalize, kind of like in relationships, right? Okay? Is that you compartmentalize the things that you don't want to deal with, and this is how sometimes we deal with those paradigm conflicts, as we call them. So this, once again, gets back to, the always was an educator where you say, well, we just need more education. And the reality is that's true, is that as many of us know that our K-12 students are outperformed every year by countries like Paraguay. Paraguay beat us again last year on science achievement for high school students. So obviously more education can certainly help, and that's what we do, for instance, through the Evolution Education Institute, is try and get our K-12 teachers, get our students to understand this so we can have the conversation. Because if we can get to the table and have the conversation, we can agree to disagree, but we all need to get at least to the table and have enough knowledge to have that conversation. And we have to say also that people that are, staunch, who think, what was your term, scientism, who say, well, I will not in any way consider anything about faith-based ideologies. Shouldn't you learn about them first before you discard them? Right? And then same goes for both sides, if there are, in fact, two sides. Is there a question back here in the cheap seats? Yes.
I find a somewhat interesting similarity, at least, between the way people will pick through religious material, i.e. the Bible, and say, okay, I agree with this, I don't agree with this, I do agree with this, and I don't agree with that, and at least in their interpretations. And a similarity between that and I agree with this bit of science, I don't agree with this bit of science, and they don't see connections. Right. That's the one thing that I tend to push towards people, is it's all connected. Every bit of it is connected together. If you're going to drop one little bit, you're going to lose a whole lot. You're going to drop evolution, let's go back to medicine of 1830. And I see that interesting connection between how many different versions of Christianity are there and what they will take and not take out of science. I don't know if you got any comment on that.
Well, and I think that your point is well made, is that we all, some people tend to be cafeteria scientists and cafeteria theologians, right? And we say, well, I like this, I don't like this, I like this. And in some faith-based ideologies, it's the full package or nothing. They're not necessarily. In fact, if you just saw in USA Today yesterday, there was a really nice full two-page article on the latest poll on declared religiosity in the United States. And we've seen yet another precipitous decline in people who identify with any religion. I'm making this number up, but I think it was 42% who said that their particular faith isn't of concern, their particular religion isn't concerned, it's their faith. So about 42%, I believe the number was, that don't really identify with any particular faith. So it's actually even gone further than you suggest, Will, saying that, well, I might not just pick and choose from my own religion. I might pick something from that one and that one and that one and that one. It's kind of cafeteria theology, and that may work. It doesn't work in science. It doesn't work in science. You can't have dinosaurs disappearing 65 million years ago on a planet that's 6,000 years old. There's an issue. Yeah. Yes, sir.
I'm curious when the issue of global warming became politicized, because I don't remember it being such a hot-button issue when I was in high school and they were teaching us about environmental issues. And it just seems like common sense, even if you don't necessarily believe that global warming is occurring, the things that we think are causing global warming should be at least public health issues like smog and acid rain. So
you suffer from a common disease of members in this group. It's called logic. And if you don't stop it, your head's going to hurt and you're just going to get frustrated. Okay? The global warming issue started about 8 years ago. I'm thinking about 8 years ago. And we had a gentleman speak here from University of Michigan, Dr. Henry Pollack, speak on the broader issue of not just global warming, but he's just recently retired, I think, from University of Michigan. He's been working on global warming for 35 years. And I know Jeff and I had dinner with him once, and he couldn't believe that this whole evolution thing was even an issue, but he also couldn't understand that why all the concern about global warming now when he spent his entire professional career studying it. It's not something that we just thought, oh, it's happening. It became what happened. The science turned into politics, which turned into policy. As you know now, as of the last election in Australia, which happened last month, we are now the only westernized nation that has not signed the Kyoto Accord on global warming. But at least last year, the administration admits that warming is happening now. We still agree to disagree on the cause, and that's okay. I just finished composing with a couple of authors the position paper for the Michigan Science Teachers Association on global warming instruction. And, read every single page of the intergovernmental report on global warming, and wow, talk about a tight document. And you're looking at over 2,000 scientists, the creme de la creme in global climate research that signed that, and it's so tight, it's so clean. But yet, we have an administration who says, I don't know. Okay, now, is it anthropogenic? Is it human-induced? Some part, without a doubt. We still, and for years, may not know the exact numbers, but there's no doubt that there's an anthropogenic cause. And so, if we know that it's increasing the rate it is, wouldn't we want to at least address it? Okay, it may not be 50%, it may not be 40%, it may be 80%, but to do nothing, of course, is not an acceptable alternative.
We've been talking a lot about how ideology influences science, but you could follow the cycle right back around, because as we were looking at all this FDA information, I immediately thought of the monthly update on pseudoscience that I get every time I visit my family, because one of my relatives knows just about every little scandal that's happened with the FDA, and he takes that to be evidence that science is a method. He associates that with science as a method, as an institution, as a body. And so his solution is alternative health remedies that are, and if you look at the arguments, I mean, these are people that are semi-educated. They get upset about things that really you should get upset for, but it creates a whole sphere for pseudoscience to jump in its place. And so the solution you're proposing, and I can't bring myself to disagree with you, is that education is what's needed. But some of these people do have a little bit of education, and we know that a little bit of education can be a very bad thing, right?
Yeah, and we see, all of us, we have a learned group in here, and we all do things that we know probably aren't congruent with our knowledge base, so we're all victims of that. I mean, as I may have brought up this example before, if I gave you $10 to go out and buy a lottery ticket, and you had to choose 6 numbers, how many of you would be willing to choose 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? A couple of you. statistically you have the exact same odds of winning with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as you do by taking the birth number of your children divided by the days in the winter solstice, divided by the number of liters produced by yak fat during the spring solstice. It's the same, but yet you probably wouldn't feel comfortable doing it. So there are these, the disharmonies in ourself, but you're right. I mean, education is where we have to go, and that's a difficult thing because, the historians are saying now we need to teach more history. We need also in the paper today, you saw that only half of high school students can correctly point as to what half of a century the U.S. Civil War occurred. So if I was a historian, I'd be depressing you just as much with history. So, and one of the goals, actually one of the issues in that article says that, in education, because I'm an educator and we always talk education ease, is that right now it's outcomes, right? And it's critical thinking. Sometimes at the sacrifice of content. A lot of the content is nonsense, but a lot of it has just gone the wayside so we can break into small groups and do group hugs. Okay? Now, is there value of that? Certainly there is, and I'm being a little bit facetious. But there is, we see in education, which is important, because I could come up and give the same talk as that we don't have enough critical thinking. So there has to be a balance there. And in Michigan, as you know, here, we have just added a great deal of required graduation requirements. My son was the last one to come out of Mission High School with that blow-off senior year, where the second half you went for two classes and you went to Starbucks for the rest of the day. We've added math requirements, and they're not just suggestions. I mean, I've worked on these. They're tight. They're good. So things are going to look good. Hopefully, we can come back here in 10 years and say, gee, Chicken Little, it didn't happen. Let's hope it doesn't. Yes? I'm sorry.
I want to talk about, excuse my voice for being raspy, but there's a great irony, I think, in the scientific religious argument, is that I've never been in a group like this before, and this really feels comforting to me to be around people that I know. At least these people are thinking. It really makes me feel good, by the way. It's the first time I've ever been to one.
But I can tell you a story. So
yeah, I do.
Just to get that clear, okay.
The irony I've always found, and I go on the internet a lot, and I do things just to kind of soothe my own soul, read things from people that have a modicum of intelligence. And I've become, over the years, very knowledgeable about the Bible. And I went to a Methodist church and everything, and I learned the basic fundamentals, but I've really gotten into it because I wanted to be a worthy adversary to someone that would argue with me about the Bible. And the irony of it is that I know more about the Bible than people that know about the Bible know about what I know. And it's very frustrating. I feel like I'm preaching to the choir. The people I correspond with on the internet are like-minded. And all we're doing is actually just, verifying our belief to one another. And I'm not getting to anyone. I've got a fiancée. She was in a Christian background, and I'm chipping away at her veneer. But it's taken a long time. But I don't even bother to cast pearls before swine when I meet someone that's indoctrinated into the Christian or whatever, pseudo-Christian, whatever you want to call it, life. And I'm sure a lot of you have that same frustration.
Let us know how that veneer chipping goes. That's what happened to the fall of Rome, wasn't it? I learned so much veneer. But what you said is in fact been echoed by someone else tonight. And one of the comments I made is that, I think from this side of the audience, is that, if we're going to have the debate in science, don't we want the people who have non-scientific beliefs or ideologies to first learn about science before they say, I don't want to accept it? And my suggestion was, if you demonstrated in your own readings, is that shouldn't we learn about whatever the alternative view? You've chosen, science and religion, but whatever it is, whether it's Holocaust, no Holocaust, pre-Civil War history, post-Civil War history, Van Gogh versus Cezanne, you should have knowledge about both before you decide. And an example I've shared with some people in here before is that I'm commonly asked to do debates, and I don't do the debates commonly because it's the he said, she said, and at the end you're supposed to declare a winner. You can't discuss science in that format. So I'll say, we'll do what we call a dual presentation format, where we agree to have maybe 20 minutes on here's how science approaches the world. The other person may here's how theology approaches the world, and then we entertain questions from the audience. But I was asked to do a debate once with one of the big intelligent design players, and I said, yeah, that'd be fine, that's fine. Here are the rules, though. We'll do a dual presentation with the goal being to educate the audience rather than to trying to declare who wins. And there's this silence on the other end of the phone because this was designed to be for university students. And I said, are you there? He goes, yeah, I'm there. I said, so I think what our goal should be was to teach them how to think, not what to think. Amen. And he said, I guess I have a philosophical difference with you then. End of story. Guys, thanks for coming. I'll be happy to stay over here afterwards. Appreciate it. Thank you. I have business cards up here if you need to get a hold of me. Hi there.
Quick question.
Yes.
You mentioned